Call to order the Board of Equalization meeting, Tuesday, April 9th, 2019. With the records show, we are missing one commissioner, Commissioner Steiner. As the meeting begins, this is the Board of Equalization for the City of Dickinson. And we shall meet on the second Tuesday of April and shall meet at the place of meeting of the governing body, which is this commission chambers. Myself, I will act as the chairman of the Board of Equalization, and we have done the roll call. Right now, we have the city assessor, Mr. Hirschfeld, present, and Mr. Hirschfeld, has the work of the local assessor been completed and all assessments entered into the assessment roll?
Mr. President, it has.
Okay, we'll proceed to the assessor's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Commissioners, as of late this afternoon, we ran new numbers. The true and full valuation for the City of Dickinson in 2019, commercial properties were valued at $1,108,830,000 as compared to 2018, where that was $1,226,400,000. So we've had a decrease in the commercial valuation, 18 over 19. Residential properties, the full valuation for 2019 is $1,440,300,000 as compared to $1,422,760,000 last year. So we are just a slight increase in our residential value this year overall. New construction in 2019 for commercial was $3,200,000, pretty similar to last year's $3,800,000. Residential properties, we had a new construction of $8,608,000 as compared to $18,500,000 last year. The total new construction then for 2019 is $11,855,400 for 2019. Taxable valuation for 2019 has decreased to $120,254,828 compared to 2018's taxable valuation of $125,344,826. Our median sales ratio for commercial properties in 2019 was 92.5%, and for residential properties it was 89.4%. The adjusted ratio that will go in the supplemental abstract given to the state, and that number which is used to see if we are within tolerance for our sales ratio analysis. Commercial is at 83.9%, so we are underneath our 90 to 100% tolerance. And our residential is at 90.3, so just within tolerance. Our commercial is lower this year due to the commercial revaluation that occurred and an equalizing of the commercial properties. My recommendation to the Board of Equalization here is that we leave the values as adjusted at this time. Open to any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Hirschfeld on the assessor's report?
And then if there's no questions, I also wanted to bring to your attention that of the 10,400 parcels that the City of Dickinson has, we sent out notices of increase to 365 parcels. A notice of increase goes out to a parcel that has had a 10% and $3,000 adjustment or more. As of this morning, we had 38 properties contest their value. Of those, as of when I printed this off this afternoon, we'd suggested corrections to 14 of those parcels. So we did find a few that had changed or had an error in their calculation that we went ahead and corrected. The net total of that change was $5,732,900.
And that is, Mr. Hirschfeld, that is the sheet that we have, the BOE properties adjusted worksheet?
That is correct.
Those are the properties that you went out and physically looked at that they had come into your office?
Mr. President, that is correct, yes.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Hirschfeld on the adjustments? The next item on the agenda is the tax abatements, and that'll be presented by Deb Kirchenheider. Will be presenting the tax abatements.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I'm Deb Kirchenheider, Senior Property Appraiser, and I'm here to present the 2018 abatement for the Patricia and George Alis property. The 2018 assessed value is $525,700, and the deed holder's requested value is $425,000. Mr. Hirschfeld and I met with Mr. Alis and completed an interior inspection of his home, and we did make some minor changes to his property record card, changing the condition and removing the heat and air conditioning to his sunroom addition. Following the corrections, we left a message with Mr. Alis by phone with the results of our inspection and did get a return message from him stating the changes were fine with him, that he was pleased to have some adjustment made to his valuation. So with that, the recommendation of the assessing staff is to change the 2018 value to $492,000.
Okay, any questions for Mrs. Kirchenheider? And on this change, we will need a motion.
So the sunroom wasn't air conditioned or heated?
Correct. And we had listed that it did have air conditioning and heat, but he stated that he does not have air conditioning or heat in the sunroom, and he had removed the door in between the house and the sunroom. So basically, it's built to the quality of his home, and he said he hasn't had any issues with it not being correct temperature.
Okay.
Any other questions on this property? Now I look for a motion on this application for abatement.
I move we approve the abatement application with the value that they agreed to.
We have a motion to approve.
Second.
Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Abatement. Thank you. At this time period, Mr. Hirschfeld, do you have additional information before we move to the equalize and correct the assessed roll? Do you have any additional information you'd like to provide to us?
Mr. President, I don't have anything at this time, so I believe we're ready to listen to anybody who's here to contest their value.
Okay. Do you have a piece of property that you want to contest the assessed value? Please come forward, state your name, and let us know which property it is.
Good afternoon, City Board of Equalization. My name is Dave Bauer, President of Bauer Property Management. I'm here on behalf of Carlos Royal to appeal the values of Silvergate Townhomes, Century Apartments, and Park Place Apartments. Mr. Royal is seeking a reduction of the 2019 assessed values. The publication ND Tax Property Tax Assessment Process states in point number 3, the assessment may be reduced upon presentation of evidence to support the appeal. I asked Kimberly Vietmeyer, property tax specialist out of the tax office of the state of North Dakota, what would constitute evidence to support the appeal. Kimberly's response was, any information you feel is pertinent can be presented. For instance, income information or a recent market appraisal. We do take into consideration market rents when performing the income approach. Mr. Royal has presented, and through some documentation tonight, the following evidence to support the appeal of lowering the assessed values on the 3 properties: independent appraisals, income and expense reports, and comparable sales in Dickinson. One question, just as a property manager, if these industry standard methods aren't evidence enough to have the assessed values lower, than what more information would be necessary? And of course, that's a rhetorical question, but that's kind of where I want to go with this. Carlos also wrote a letter, and I don't want to read the whole thing, but I would like to read 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph I want to read is the 3rd paragraph on the first page. It says, Joe, Mr. Hirschfeld, justifies his over-assessments with the following statement in an email to me, that would be Carlos Royal, dated April 5th. Quote, as I have stated, the North Dakota system allows it, quote, to all come out in the wash, end quote. I know of no such provision in the code. Every residential and commercial property is to be assessed at its market value every year, and there are to be enough spot checks to verify the accuracy of the listings and the valuations, not it all comes out in the wash. I know of no provision that allows the assessor to intentionally overassess my property, or any property for that matter. This is just an abuse of power by the assessor. And then the second paragraph that I would like to read is the second paragraph on the second page. I ask you, please review the actual comparable sales to properties like mine. Take note, none are over $40,000 per unit. I ask you to also review the independent appraisals for 2017 and 2018 of these properties, plus what the state's appraisals were for 2018, and then reduce these 3 properties 5% for 2019. Midway through 2018, Joe Eibach appraised Century Apartments for just $3.5 million. Do you really think this property is worth almost $7 million as the assessor claims? No, Joe is just back to targeting me. Century's net operating income was just $60,310 in 2017 and only $54,167 in 2018, a decline of about 10%, not an increase. So the next page is this. It just shows comparable sales, and you can see that that all the sales price per unit on the far right-hand column, the high is $40,000. All of the rest are $30,000 and under, until you get to February 4th of 2019, where there are 3 apartment buildings that were bought for $38,276 a unit and $38,519 a unit. And there's a DSU building that's pending, and as near as we can tell, the sale price will be right at $930,000 with the sales price per unit of $38,750. So again, comparable sales not over $40,000. The next page, the recent appraisals and values, it just highlights the fact that the appraisals that have been done, independent appraisals, and even the State Board of Equalization appraisals are lower than what the assessed value is. And a note here at the bottom, it says, if 2018's corrected assessments on Century, Silvergate, and Park Place are the new baselines, then instead of Century increasing 35.6%, Silvergate increasing 23.2%, and Park Place increasing 18.9%, they all should have been reduced by 5%, as were the rest of the apartments in Dickinson. The next page is a slide you've all seen before. It's just renamed, but it's Joe Eibach's appraisal of Century Apartments in 2018, where he appraised the value at $3.5 million. The assessed value in 2018 was $6.9527 million, so overassessed according to the appraisal of $3,452,700. I read the first letter, or the first page of my letter, and I highlighted the things that were needed: income approach, comparable sales, as well as independent appraisals. And so this next slide shows the actual income and expenses for 2018, which were submitted to the assessor. And so that's the highlighted portion I have on the far right-hand side, where it says Silvergate, Century, Park Place. It shows the actual income. We used 45% expenses. Actually, it's going to be a little bit more than that. On the actual income, it's considerably more than that. And then you see the net operating income for each one of those apartments. And you can see that Park Place lost $32,886 for the year. I wanted to next, I don't know if I submitted this to you or not. I don't think I did, but this is what Joe sends out for us to fill out. And we didn't fill it out because it says in lieu of completing this form, a copy of the income and expense statements must be submitted or may be submitted. And so that's what we, Carlos, I should say, Mr. Royal, submitted to Mr. Hirschfeld. And I did not include those in your report, but Mr. Hirschfeld does have these very detailed reports, and they highlight 15, 16, 17, and 18. And that's where we come to the next slide, where it says overall assessments down 5%, but Century was up 35.6, Silvergate was up 23.2, and Park Place was up 18.9. So you can see that if we were to take the assessed value in 2018 and lower them by 5%, that green box on the far right is what Mr. Royal is requesting his values be, or his buildings be revalued at. And he made a note, it appears these three properties were targeted to get their values back up to where they were prior to the state's valuations. So just for Century, you know, goes from $5.1 million all the way to $6.9 million, a 36% increase in 1 year, where the economy in Dickinson is improving, but not nearly that much. And the overall apartment assessments, from my understanding, haven't gone down 5% for the year.
Mr. Bauer?
Yep.
Quick question. For Park Place, where is the $431,000 coming from? Because I have the state report here, and it said they changed the value to $455,000. And I see it throughout this report.
That may, I'm not going to say that's wrong. I'm going to say I don't know where the 431 came from. It should have matched what the state had.
This is their report here.
Okay, then that might be a typo.
Okay. So
Good-
Park Place
good
should be valued at $455,000. That was the state board's change.
Okay.
And just for clarification for everyone watching or in the audience, that is what the state board adjusted. That was not the given adjustment.
Correct.
Or the assessed value from the city of Dickinson or the county of,
That's my understanding.
from
yes.
Stark County. That was the adjusted value from the state board.
That's my understanding, yep. So then the next chart, or the next slide is, does this look like a 35.6% increase? And the way these read is 2015 is the high end of the chart, or the high end of the graph, and it goes down to 2018. And it's a little bit small, but the increase, or the increase from year 2017 to 18, and then from 18 to 19, that's what these represent, 23% increase in the valuation from 2018 to 2019. And then for Century, it's 35.6, and Park Place, it's basically 19%. And then the final page I have is what they really should be. This is the requested values that mirrors the other slide, except for the Park Place. I think you said 455?
Yes.
Okay, yep. So whatever that adjustment would be, 5% off of that would be what we're looking for. My goal was to be under 10 minutes. Was I good?
Pretty good.
Good. Okay, any questions for you, or any additional information, Mr. Bauer?
No, that'll do it.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Bauer? Much of the data that Mr. Bauer, and like I clarified before, was the increase that he is speaking of is from what the state board adjusted last year from our original value. The value, for example, that we had placed on Century was $7,890,000, and the state adjusted it to $5,129,000.
Correct.
That is correct. So just for clarification, and you did say you turned in all of your income statements to the assessing department.
Yes, we did.
And just for an item of note, that all property owners, especially rental property owners, this is very helpful to the assessing department if your income off these properties is turned into the assessing department in a timely manner, so they can use that information to make adjustments. I know we just received some information today, and that it makes it very hard for us to adjust when we receive it the day of the Board of Equalization.
Couldn't agree more. That's why that email was sent December 29th.
Right. So, and I would thank you for sending that in. Anyone have any questions? Okay. Mr. Hirschfeld, any comments?
Mr. President, Commissioners, thank you. Well, I want to address the comment of it comes out in the wash, because that has been used quite a bit out in the public and taken out of context. And we certainly have an example now that illustrates what I meant when I made the comment. And it pertains to going back 3 years for sales and using historical data when the property owners, if you will, living in the now, based off what they can earn on that currently. And so as we went into the boom cycle, the value of the property was higher than the assessed value. And as we came out of that into the bust, that trend inverted, if you will. And at one point they crossed, and the assessed values were then higher than the value of the property. And that's what Mr. Bauer is here to testify today. But I want to point out 3 sales that Mr. Royal picked up here this year in 2019. They're not part of the sales ratio analysis, but those 3 sales, if you take it as a whole, are valued at 8% below what the purchase price was. Now, I know Mr. Royal previously said, he wants it valued at what it's worth, but I didn't hear anything to decrease that. So when we work on a median, a median sales ratio, when we talk about medians, that's the middle. There are going to be properties that are overassessed a little bit. There's going to be properties that are underassessed a little bit. We have 3 properties in Silvergate, Park Place, and Century that the property owner believes are overassessed, but we have these 3 here that are underassessed. The state board also increased the value of one of Mr. Royal's properties. To be consistent, I removed that increase off of that property and decreased it. But we're not here today to hear that one. That should come out as well, that I am consistent in what we do. We have a model that we follow that returns a value. Is it accurate to 100% of properties? No, there are outliers, but we statistically capture a large percentage of those, and that's how we equalize properties. So just wanted to make sure that the citizens are aware of that we don't target properties for what their sale price is. It's rather, it usually ends up being a range of potential sale prices, and that's dictated by, varying buyers and sellers' reactions to the market. Other than that, I don't have a lot more to address. We've had these properties before so many times. We're all very familiar with the ins and outs of these properties. I believe we have sales that support the value, and beyond that, we do have the 2019 value that was returned by Vanguard Appraisals in our commercial revaluation. And, I'm not ready to change his values without having some consideration from the gentleman and the team that returned those values to us. And I'll leave the comments then now back to you, Mr. President, and go forward from there.
With the information that you have gathered recently and what Vanguard has presented, is there anything that we could look at on these large properties?
Mr. President, thank you. Yeah, in regards to the large ones, and I always appreciate Mr. Royal and Mr. Bauer returning their information to us. it's hard to make a judgment call off of one property. One property doesn't make a market. However, in the last 12 to 24 hours, we've had information returned to us that wasn't returned when we requested it in November, December, that indicates that maybe on these parcels that have more units, certainly over 100 units, that there might be some economies of scale that we could adjust that for.
What would that adjustment be?
Not entirely certain that we've got that locked down, but we were looking at 10%, a 10% adjustment to that. And that certainly kind of follows on some of the other properties that we'll be talking about this evening as well.
So that would be on units, you're saying, of 100 or more. I don't know, what do we, just on, what would that encompass in Dickinson? How many different properties?
On the older apartments, like what Mr. Royal owns, Century Apartments is the only one of that size.
And then the newer ones?
I don't have that number that comes to mind, but approaching 10 or a dozen maybe.
Okay. So most of the newer ones that were built are over 100 units?
That is correct.
Okay. So looking at that 10% would be about $695,000 reduction on Century. Am I correct?
That is correct.
And when can the adjustments to these large properties, when could you have those ready for us, if that is your suggestion?
And before I answer that, Mr. President, if I may back up, the 10% adjustment we were looking was to, not to total value, but to improved value.
Improved
It would
value,
be-
okay. So not the land,
Not
but
the land part of that, but would be the improved part of that.
the improved part.
And
So
that's,
it wouldn't be exactly 695,000. It would be roughly, you'd take the land out and then
somewhere around 7.5%, or maybe even more, 7.5% to 9%.
9%, okay. Is there any objection from the Board of Equalization to having Mr. Hirschfeld do that on these large properties?
Mr. President, I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
Mr. Hirschfeld, so obviously comparable sales and income are the two most important approaches according to the State Board. How does market sales compare from last year in regards to this valuation?
And I apologize, I don't have everything in front of me. We'd have to go back to the report that was returned. But our market sales, if we look at what we had in 2018 and 2017, I think our apartments were valued at 98% of sales price. So for all intents and purposes, our valuation was, spot on a median with where apartments were selling. So, and that's our older units, so we had, pretty good representation of that, pretty good consistency. If we look at the 2019 sales, they weren't included in this, but it's certainly kind of a trend. Well, we go from that 98% now to 92%, so the trend, off of 3 sales, take that for what you will, indicates that maybe the market's starting to come back a little bit. It's looking pretty favorable. And, that stands to reason. We're seeing activity north of us in Watford and Williston start to pick up, and we usually lag them by a year or two, so, it's not unreasonable that the apartments, the sales of those wouldn't trend up a little bit.
If you review the staff report for the 2018 State Board of Equalization, there's a lot of information on here on how they came to their conclusion. And they came back with, a drastically different number than what was originally sent to them. Our initial assessment was $7,890,300. And they came back with a valuation of $5,129. Value of $42,750 roughly per unit. So based on that, why is there such a difference between our evaluations and the values that they came up with?
Mr. President, Commissioner Trustum, I'm not sure I can answer that perfectly. I did not see their full report. I saw their final analysis. I do know that they used a rate of return that was different than what I saw in the market. If you use a different rate of return, you will get a different value. And that's about as best as I can answer that right now without seeing their full analysis.
Can you explain rate of return?
A rate of return is taken from the market. So if you have a property sell for $1 million and its income was 100,000, that would be, you would use that, and if I'm doing the math right, would show a 10% rate of return then. And, you know, if you have enough sales, it should, you know, kind of lean. You might have one that shows 14%, you might have another one that shows 4%, but you should show that, you know, between 9.5 and 10.5 is where the rate of return is. Then on similar properties, then you might decide to reconcile with the value of 10% as your rate of return. And that's something that Mr. Ayler did in his report, and on these properties that we had returned as sales, and the income that was returned to him too. I believe our rate of return in Dickinson was 6.5%, and I don't recall what the state used, but I believe it was something quite a bit higher than that.
Yeah, I don't see that in the report here. That's the only questions I had, Mr.
Okay.
President.
Thank you, Mrs. Trustum. Any other question? Again, my recommendation would be that, upon your suggestion, that we look at these large properties, look at a 10% on the improved value, not the, as you said, the land, but just the improvements to the property. And then bring that back. We have, our follow-up meeting is in, the second meeting in, or is it the next meeting in April? Is it-
We reserved space for next week's meeting,
Okay,
but from what I've heard, there may be additional properties brought forward, which I'm not entirely certain we'll be able to research all of those and have it returned in a week's time. I mean, something like this we could do in a week's time, but I'm anticipating there'll be additional work that wasn't expected. And in regards to the 10% to the improvements, I don't think that would be out of line.
okay.
Mr. President, Mr. Hirschfeld, can you compare Mr. Royal's properties that we're talking about tonight to the most recent sales? I mean, are they similar?
The price per unit?
That's where I'm going, I guess. 'Cause-
Mr. President, Commissioner Frederick, after looking at the values that were returned, I mean, I look at this, you know, many different ways. You know, are we accurate? I'm not just happy with the value returned from our CAMA system. You know, I need to be able to justify that value and show that it's supportable. And so, you know, the question, oh, we don't do an income approach. Well, I consider the income data, and I'll work it up for a specific property and see if the values are reasonable. If they're not, then, you know, I'm looking at maybe having an error somewhere. And I do the same thing with our sales. And so, you know, if we start at the top, we look at Silvergate. Our assessed value for 2019 on a per unit basis is $63,000. Those are townhomes. There's 4 townhouses and 3 different buildings. The nearest thing that we had that's similar to that were the, I call them the Bush Apartments, that they sold to the Alumni Association, and then the association through receivership, they sold at auction at $64,000 unit in 2016. And so, you know, just looking at that sale, we're going back 3 years, and on a per unit basis, they're very close. But when you look at what's happened in the last 3 years, I mean, you look at the 3 most recent sales, they also sold in 2016, and they're showing an increase of roughly 60% in the last 3 years. Now, some of that is certainly due to some repairs and overdue maintenance, but not all of it. A lot of that's a market increase too. And at the 2017 abatement hearing, Mr. Royal stated that the property on Sims was an exact, comp, exactly similar to Park Place. They're a block apart. They're both 12 units, and they are very similar. And, to his credit, he had the county commission reduce his value to that $360,000 sale price for Park Place, and that's what he was given in his abatement hearing. But now that property was purchased, and it was kind of tied up with another property within the deed, so that muddies it up a little bit. But visited with the seller a little bit, and his consideration on that, and it may not be Mr. Royal's consideration, but the seller's consideration was that Sim Street property is worth $600,000 or $50,000 a unit. And if we go back and look at what that Sim Street one is valued at today, it's at $43,510. And so we've got another indicator, a recent one, that we're awful close on Park Place to what the market is. And that brings us down to Century, and there isn't anything like Century in town. But I'm comfortable here looking that we've got 9 out of 10 of Mr. Royal's properties at or below assessed value, and wondering why Century would be off by 50%. 10% adjustment, I could support that. 50% or more, harder to support when the other 9 are all falling in line. And that's just how I see these values when I look at all the data that I have. It doesn't make sense to me to come in at a 3.5, which was returned. That doesn't make sense. It's so far out of where the other 9 indicators are. I hope that answered your question, Mr. Frederick.
So, Mr. Bauer, Mr. Royal's looking at a value on Park Place of $34,121. But we have a similar sale where somebody paid $43,510. Explain to me how, and we have it at $42,730. So explain to me how we feel that your value is worth, it's worth what you're saying, but we have a sale that's within the last couple months that's actually even higher than what you're assessed at now.
Guess I'm not seeing the sale.
The
That
Sims
information-
property,
I'm sorry?
the property on Sims.
I don't have an address. Do you have it?
423 Sims was tied together with the 138 13th Avenue West for a total of 29 units. Combined, those units all sold for $38,276.
Okay, let's
And
let's go with that then.
okay, so
Why are you at 34,121 then? And we're only at that we're
Oh,
we're 4,000 a unit apart, but
okay, I see where you are here. Okay, so 2 things. Number one, Mr. Hirschfeld said he spoke with the seller, which would have been Venture Homes, and they stated that they felt that 423 Sims was worth $50,000 a unit. Well, if they felt it was worth $50,000 a unit, why would they sell it for $38,276 a unit? So, a question, I don't have an answer. Okay, so overall assessment's down 5%. That's the chart you're on, sir?
I think some of the confusion is the data that's in this chart that we were given, because the state lowered their value to 455, which you placed 431.
Correct.
So that percentage, if you look at it, that percentage is, I'll have to do the
how many units is Park Place?
12.
Yeah, what's 455 divided by 12? So 37,916.
Yeah. So it should be, their chart says 34.1. It should be 37.9.
But even at that, if we go to the state value, obviously somebody just paid 38,000 a unit. So aren't we right there?
An average of 38,000 with the 2 combined.
Yes, that's correct. The average is 2 combined, yes. So yeah, certainly that's close.
But Mr. Royal still wants 34.
Well, like I said, I think it's a data.
It'd be different.
Well, no, because he's,
Well, if you.
well, you
if
take the,
change-
if you take the 409 divided by 12.
Well, like I
That's
said,
what he's
you're
looking-
gonna have to change,
Oh, I see
you're gonna
what
have to
you're
change this. So it's not 409 anymore.
The assessed value that's written here is 431. Based on the overall apartment industry in Dickinson, it went down about 5%. That's where the requested value is, the 95%. So adjust your to 455. I didn't bring my phone up with me, so whatever the calculation is there to reduce it by 5% in keeping with the overall market.
$36,020 it would be then.
Okay, there you have it.
Any other questions for Mr. Bauer or Mr. Hirschfeld?
Just one for Mr. Hirschfeld. Explain that purchase. When you say it muddied the waters, what was, there was 2 units combined?
That is correct. On the deed, the property located on Sims, and there was another property closer to the college were combined under one deed. And the total purchase price was $1,100,000. And so the average of that is the $38,500 that Mr. Bauer is talking about. But when I also verified the information with the seller, he said his consideration was $600,000 for the one unit and $510,000 for the other unit. So we've got one property at $30,000 a unit and one property at $50,000 a unit, and then the third property sold for $38,000. I mean, a perfect example of median. We've got one at $30,000, one at $50,000. They're different properties; they can have different values. And one at $38,000. The median's the middle, and you know the median's showing at $38,000, but the individual properties can have different values. And even at $30,000 for, and that would be the one on the bottom of the list there that's in yellow. I mean, we're at $29,600 on it. And it sold per the seller for $30,000 was his consideration. And Mr. Royal's consideration is something different, and that's okay too. But another point of information, we are 8% under the aggregate total of all these properties. You can call it 38,000, but we're 8% below market. And that's the number that I look at. How close are we to sale price with assessed value? And we're 8% under.
Any other questions, comments? Like I said, my recommendation would be that we use the suggestion from Mr. Hirschfeld to lower the large properties by the 10% to the improvement value.
It's not going to affect Park Place or Silvergate.
It will not, no. And then, so, that's a separate discussion.
I'm ready to make a motion.
All right.
I move that we deny a reassessment on Silvergate 0050-0302-0000. Leave it at the value at $63,140 per unit, or $757,700.
I have a motion to deny Silvergate
Second.
with a second. Any further discussion? Now we'll vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We'll move on to Park Place.
I'll make a motion to change the value to $40,000 per unit, or $480,000 on 0010-2400-1100 Park Place.
I have a motion to reduce the unit price from $42,730 to $40,000 flat on Park Place.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. On the Century Apartments, property ID 1160-0100-0101. The present value is $6.9 million with a, under the advice of Mr. Hirschfeld, that they would like to look at the improved reduction of 10% on the improvements to that property.
I'd make a motion to table that then till the next meeting. Is that how we'd want to handle that?
Would that be fine to table it till, so they can make that adjustment? And this is probably going to carry over to all large properties, anything over 100 units. So,
Your Honor, will I need to attend that meeting?
It's discretionary.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So just want to make sure.
okay. So we have a motion to table until we get the final adjustments on that property. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion with a second to table Century Apartments with a 10% adjustment to the improvements of that property. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Bauer.
Thank you.
Hi, members of the board, Terry Clement Dickinson. This is on properties that have been reduced by the state. I'll give you copies here. It's 2150 First Street West, 128 23rd Avenue West, 1527 and 1589 10th Avenue West, which both the last two properties are 40 years old, 39 years old. The second page.
Mr. Clement?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I didn't give them the addresses. I do have the properties listed as Abode, Temley, Jewel Blue, and TMJ, so.
The second page is the part of the complaint that goes to the state. You can read that. I'm sure you can read it in 5 minutes. And, what I'm proposing is to keep those. I've got a couple other properties too. There's one residential property, and on the back part of that, our Pheasant Run. It's Pheasant Run. So they've increased that by 17,000 or so. I just wanted to know why, because there's no reason for it. No, 13,200, I guess.
Mr. Clement, did you meet with the assessing department before this meeting?
I've talked to Joe 20 times. I mean, I talked to him before I came tonight. I've talked to him in other times. He says, hey, the properties, if things go bad in Dickinson, they're going to go down as fast as they went up. Well, that's a lie. I mean, that's just not true. They don't. He says, well, we got to go back a couple years and do this and that. And I don't really want a bunch of double talk. I just want to tell you that I know what the properties are worth. I have a lot of properties, and I haven't complained about most of them. Now, these properties, I complained to the state. The state came over. They sent their people over. They went through all the properties. They reduced them. Joe says, well, they made a mistake. Well, it's always a mistake if it's different from what the assessor says. But it wasn't a mistake. They came over, went through all the properties, they adjusted them, and they went down to 40,000. Down to 40,000. 1527, 1589. Matter of fact, it was 39.8. I don't know. I'd have to figure it out here. I don't need a calculator. But it was 40,000, right around 40,000. You guys just talked about 40,000. Well, they didn't reduce them lower than around 40,000. Now they've jumped them back up. Some 47,000, 43,000. 1589 and 1527, 10th Avenue West, 40-year-old properties. I've got pictures of 1589 in there. I didn't have time to take pictures of all the rest of them, 1527 and 2150. So all I'm asking is to go with the state. Go with the state properties until, you know, a dramatic increase in rents comes about. We're renting our stuff from $325 to $425 on one bedrooms. I mean, yeah, one bedrooms, and $375 to $575 on two bedrooms. Like the $475 on one bedrooms, $575 on two bedrooms, $325 on one bedrooms, $425 on two bedrooms. And that's on older properties, and some of those properties I don't even have in here, but the properties at 1527 and 1589 are $475 to $575. $475 one bedrooms, there's not many one bedrooms, and $575 on two bedrooms. And that's, you know, I mean, I can go through a bunch of other stuff, you know, I mean. But it all boils down to the state reduced them, leave them there for a couple years. Let's see what happens to the rents. Let's see what happens to the, you know, it's going to take me a year on 1589 to get that thing even up to standards. I've got one unit there that hasn't been rented for a year because I can't find enough guys to work on different things. Now you say, well, I'll just take guys from out of state. Well, you can't bring somebody from out of state that's going to charge you $7,000 or $8,000. How are you going to get it back?
Mr. Clement, if I go through these properties, could you just give me how many units are in abode?
Okay, 1527 has 24 units.
24.
1589 has 18 units.
Is that Tamil?
What's that?
Tamil?
Temele, yeah.
Temele?
Temele,
Okay, that's 18 units. Jewel Blue?
12 units. We only asked that to go down to 94 or 5,000, and they raised it back up from there.
And then,
128 has 8 units.
and that's TMJ?
TMJ, yeah.
8 units, okay, thank you.
It's not like I'm trying to, I mean, I'm not bragging, but, you know, I'm involved in a lot of properties, and I don't run up here and say, oh, you've got everything wrong. But these are wrong. And actually, 2150 and 128 should be less than that. But that's what they came up with. I mean, there's no winning propositions on any of these rentals anymore around Dickinson because the Dickinson's overbuilt.
Okay, you had some more? Go ahead.
Well, Pheasant Run is they're on the last part of that packet I gave you. It's just, their townhouses over there, they're like 1,100 square foot units, single garages. They increased those by 13,200 unit. What, for what reason? Really? They've been that way for 5 years.
Mr. Hirschfeld, just a quick explanation on let's Pheasant Run.
Pheasant Run, yeah.
Mr. President, I don't know anything about that, cannot comment at this time. I'd have to review that.
So did you contact Mr. Hirschfeld about Pheasant Run?
I don't know. I talked to him about 1589, 1527, 2150. I don't
So
know
you
if
talked about the apartments, but you didn't talk about the others?
Probably not about Pheasant Run. I did talk to him about a house over on 10th Avenue East. They raised up $17,900. That's 238 10th Avenue East. He said that because his assessor, whoever he's got running around, said that the basement must have been finished and we didn't assess for that. They've used that for storage. That thing's 40 years old too, and nobody's ever lived down there, but, I mean, it's got some walls and stuff in there, but there's no sense in that being raised up $17,900 either. I didn't give you copies of that, but I do have copies of that.
Well, my concern is if you had concerns about this property, okay, I know I understand you approached the assessing department about
Yeah.
the apartments.
I talked to him about this house.
Okay. And did they ask to go into it and look at the basement?
He said he'd have to see what I say at this meeting, and then he might go look at it.
Is that true?
Mr. President, I don't recall the conversation quite that way. That house was part of the revaluation effort. As near as I can tell, Jeremy Farrar was not in the property, and so he did his valuation from the curb like we've done on some others. And so I told him, after this meeting here, and I don't remember when I spoke to, there's been so many people I spoke to, maybe it was today, and I said we'd have to wait till after the meeting for me to be able to get out there, for my staff to get out there to review the property, that I didn't think we could get it looked at before the meeting, so it must have been this afternoon.
Mr. Clement, is there similar units on Second to Pheasant Run?
What's that?
Is there similar units that you don't own on Second,
I don't own any more on Second. We used to.
but there's similar units to these?
They're similar. Similar on Second Street,
Well, yeah.
right to the, yeah,
Second Street West.
yeah.
I know there's been some sales on those in the past year and a half. I was just wondering if you had any of those.
Those have been, there's been some sales on those. They're not right across the street from the oil well, but, so it's a little bit different location. So, I mean, yeah, they sold them on 140s, but, there wasn't really any reason to really increase these over here on First Street. You've built a lot of properties, you know what they're worth, where they're located.
I was just,
My main thing tonight is, I think that the state reduce these other properties. The valuation should stay with that because it's not, they didn't reduce them too far. According to what Dave Bauer just went over, you guys are saying, well, we're trying to get you guys up to 40,000. Well, they didn't reduce mine any further than 39 something, of around 40,000. And the city's jacked them back up. Now that's not fair. That's not fair. When they just did it, like on Temley, for example, that went up $140,000 in 1 year. You can look at, there has to be decks done on that. There's units that aren't done. I mean,
Mr. Clement, to clarify though,
what's that?
we keep going back to
Temley.
Tamale.
Tamale.
But just to clarify, you keep saying we went up. Our original assessed value was not the state's assessed value.
Right.
Right. When you say we went
Well,
up.
the assessor's valuation
Right.
went up from the state.
Valuation, just for example, Tamale was $951,000 last year.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah, and the state reduced it to $713.
right,
And his assessed value this year is $855.
yeah. And the state reduced them to right around 40,000 a unit.
Right, but when you keep saying that we raised them up, we did not raise we raised them from what the state reassessed them at.
Right, well, why would that happen? I mean, are they know nothing? I mean, why did they send people over here and evaluate everything if they sent a bunch of incompetent people over here or what? No, I just think they should stay with the state evaluation, the values, and a year or two from now, if the rents are way up or for some reason the value of the properties went up with other sales around there, which I doubt because, like I say, the city's overbuilt. It's going to take a long time. It's going to take 10 to 15 years for this city to come back.
Mr. Trustum?
Mr. Clement, thank you for presenting your case today. Did you supply your income for Mr. Hirschfeld to review for the properties?
On these particular ones, I didn't know I was coming here, to tell you the truth.
Okay.
I got a call and said, hey, I've got to come here, and then you can come to the state. Well, I'm sending my complaint to the state. They've got all my information. Now, I've given you the amounts that the rents are, you know, 475 to 575.
Right, there's a lot
Which-
more to it than that.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah.
You know, and I have done my best. I've talked to the state to learn more about the process and how they come to their numbers. And, you know, speaking to Joe today, you know, they use potentially a different rate of return, which is something we need to look into.
A
But
different rate of return, what do you mean?
We were just discussing it previously with Mr. Bauer. It's a,
what?
do you want to go through it again for
Uh,
Mr. Clement?
Capitalization rate, the cap rates. So when the
Oh,
state,
so I, you know, if I pay my taxes, my insurance, my maintenance, and everything else, and my payments, then I'm supposed to come up with a, okay, go ahead.
the cap rates are generated from the market. It's a reflection of what the income is for a property as compared to its sale price. And
Okay.
so with the sales that we have a market cap rate. The rate of return that used in our analysis was different than what the state had in their analysis.
Well-
They had different data, and so they came up with a different value, and that will happen.
Well, I just sold a place over 1147 17th Avenue West for $40,000 a unit. The guy wanted to pay 45. The appraisal came in at 40. We ended up selling it for 40, and that's the highest one that I know about. And then, until you've come up, you told me the other day that, well, there was one sold for a lot higher than that. Well, not in the last 3 or 4 years. You know, that one sold, that was a 12-plex, sold for 40,000 a unit. It was nicer than these units here. And, you know, the cap rate, I don't, that's what I mean, bunch of double talk. I don't want cap rates, I want to know, you know, I want you to know what properties are sold for and what they're gonna sell for and what these things should be valued at. And the state came up with something I was satisfied with. And this year, they come, you know, you guys come back and say, hey, we think you know, it's valued $140,000 higher than the state came up with. Well, yeah, well, how'd you get that? That's $47,000 a unit. I'd probably take $47,000 a unit right now, tonight. On that, on Temele.
And Mr.
Go ahead.
Mr. Clement, I appreciate that sentiment, because it does a very good job of showing the commissioners what my office goes through, because we have one ownership group who swears up and down by cap rates, and another ownership group who says that doesn't play into their consideration at all. And so, you know, all of that information, buyers' interaction, you know, how they perceive income, you know, versus the market approach, that all gets, you know, considered into this valuation. And if I can real quickly, and I should have done it for the last property, but what the commission did in adjusting the values ended up all right too. But on page 5 of the report that Vanguard sent out, in 2017, there was one sale, 3 sales from 2018. They range from $37,500 to $48,875, 4 sales. The 3 sales that were purchased this year are falling within that range, depending on whether you take Mr. Royal's version of it or the seller's version. They're either still at $38,000 or they range from $30,000 to $50,000. I mean, that is the market for the last 7 sales that have occurred, or roughly the last 18 months.
Mr. Clement, what's the difference between Abode and Timley other than 6 units?
Nothing. No, they're about the same. They're like 100 yards apart. They're on the same street. There's a 24-plex and an 18-plex. And they're the same. They're the same.
Okay, Mr.
18-plex, you know, I mean, you get smaller units, smaller, you know, an 18-plex probably sell for a little less, so that maybe would raise the price a little bit for a buyer.
No, one of them has garages though.
No. Oh, yeah, okay, 1527 has 5 garages, you're right.
That's-
But 1589 is valued higher than 1527 on the
Yeah, that's-
adjustment. 1589 is the 18-plex with no garages, and 1527 has 5 garages.
So
You know,
they're about the same age,
yeah, they're both built in 1980.
and they have similar size units,
Yes,
except there's 6 less in one building.
yes.
Okay, then what's the difference?
Mr. President, Commissioner Frederick, off the top of my head, I can't tell you for sure. Not a lot of difference. I remember garage difference, might have been a little bit of condition difference on them. And we can't forget about land value. Land value goes into our model. And so, you know, if one of them sits on a larger lot, I don't have my property record card in front of me, that might play into this value as well.
But the bigger one with more land and the garages is worth less per unit than the smaller one.
You know, it would depend on the amount of garage, I'm sorry, the amount of land per unit.
Timberlake could be on our.
And then the state valued them at almost exactly the same amount.
Right. About 40,000, 39 something. Yeah.
$39,080, I think it was, or something.
Yeah.
And you know what?
And I was satisfied with that. Why are we doing this? Why are you jumping everything up just because I went to the state? I mean, you know, that's what I think. That's what I get. Is we went there and had them come over and evaluate the things, and all of a sudden we're pointed out, and hey, we're going to teach you.
And Mr. President, if I may, that's a very good question, and one that I broached upon before, but you know, specifically right here in this context, and I appreciate Mr. Clement bringing that up. It comes from the request that, you know, we review the property record card and correct the property record card for any errors. So when we went through that, whether it's Mr. Royal's properties, or whether it's the one Mr. Clement's here, the property record card has been found to have no deficiencies in it, that it's accurate. And so we start talking about differences of opinion. If the state, and they didn't, you know, or anyone else, you know, we find an error, and we found errors. I found $5.7 million worth of errors. You know, if we find an error to correct that card in some manner, then that adjustment then would stay and stick for the next year as well. But when that doesn't happen, the State Board of Equalization value is good for the year that it was put on for 2018, and then a new value is arrived at for 2019.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Schvelt. Anything else, Mr. Clement?
Nah, I think I've ranted enough.
So these other properties that you attached to the back of this packet, these twin homes,
Well, it's an 8-unit, and they're townhouses.
the townhouses?
They're townhouses. They got single garages.
So is that something that,
Well, I'd like to know why they were.
so that's something you can go into the assessing
I
department
can
and meet
talk
with
to
them?
him, yeah.
Okay.
sure.
So what we're considering is the other 4 properties?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Clement? If not, I'd look for a motion on Mr. Clement's requests.
Mr. President, I would move to deny property ID 1140-0600-2601.
A motion to deny abode 1140-0600-2601.
Are we going to be able to ask questions or what? No. Why would that be denied? As far as keeping it the same as the state.
You know, Mr. Clement, the state has language in here in their recommendation to decrease it to the number that they came up with. Direct the city assessor to continue to closely monitor the market and make adjustments as necessary to maintain equitable and equalized assessments. So it doesn't state keep it the same.
And you think the markets went up? The market's not going to go up for 5-6 years, so I mean, you know.
You know, and I don't have all that information in front of me. So
Well, that's just what, everybody knows that. Everybody knows that, common sense. You can go out and try to rent a place and see what you rent them for. Yeah, and then see, you know, if you owned one of those, we'll see what kind of money you'd make. You can't just sit here and say, wow, you know, I mean, we deny that because of this, because somebody wrote something down doesn't mean anything. They're not they're not out in the market, you know, they're not in the trenches, you know,
Well, and I
making.
think that's the beauty of the appeal process, is we do our best to make the most informed decisions that we can with the information that we have. And you have the opportunity to go before the county and go before the state. And they,
Well-
again, get a chance to review it. And I think we respect their judgments and what they come up with, and.
Well, I'd respect your guys' judgment too if you had common sense, you know.
I don't think you're helping your case, Mr. Clement.
All right.
So, we have a motion to deny. Without a second, I'd look for a different motion.
I'm struggling with the 24 and the 18 and what the difference is, and why they're different price per unit.
Mr. President, Commissioner Frederick, if you like, we can table those two and bring those back with the other one, and I'll have that answer for you.
I mean, that's the only, I mean, if they're similar buildings within 100 yards of each other, except there's 6 less units, but the bigger one has garages, but is worth less per unit. It just doesn't make any, I'm having a hard time wrapping my arms around why that is.
And I can appreciate that question. I just unfortunately don't have a good answer for you this evening.
It's interesting, in the state report, both has subject property as 24 units. So I'm not sure why that is there. I don't know if there was in the report, both properties state on behalf of the State Board of Equalization that both these properties have 24 units. Not sure why.
I don't have the state report with me.
I don't know if that might have something to do with it. You can see it here. 24 units.
Yeah.
And Mr. Clement, to clarify, if it helps this evening, the abode is 24 unit?
Yes,
Okay, and Timley is 18 unit.
yes,
And they're built the same year,
yes.
same size apartments. Timleys aren't bigger. I mean, they're not like 3 bedrooms that are.
No, they're 2-bedroom units. I mean, I'd have to, they might be 20 feet different. I don't know. I'm not saying they're exactly the same square footage, but basically, yes, they're the same units. We rent them for the same price.
So, Mr. Frederick, to clarify that, understand your question, is it in regards to the total assessed value or the per unit value?
The per unit value. If there's similar units, it shouldn't matter that one's got 24 and one's got 18.
And we've got the 24 unit at 43,000. We have the 18 unit at 47,000. Like I said, I would have to review them side by side to give you, be 100% accurate, but there might be some economies of scale there. There may be some due to the land as well. That would be the 2 things that I would check for.
If the units are the same and they rent for the same, they're the same. It shouldn't matter if one's 18 units and one's 24.
Well, and I appreciate that, and that they certainly might sell that way. But when we do our models, it's cost-based, so we take into account size, garage, land. So they might sell for 40,000, but if one has more land, it's going to carry a little bit more value than the other one.
But according to what he's saying, the 24 has more land and has the garages, and that's less per unit.
And I can't verify that, so I would have to double check that.
So that's where my struggle is.
Mr. Hirschfeld, I have a question. So I pulled up the assessment reports on the site. So the acres tied to the abode was 1.09 acres, and then 0.965 acres for the Temley. So what's the quality per land equation that's on that report? Because the Temley is 3.0 and the abode is 8.25.
And I'm sorry, Mr. Wall, I didn't hear the last part of that statement.
I'm assuming it's on the land portion, quality per land, /land. So you have C-825 on one and then C-30 on the other. What do those represent?
That would be in regard to land value.
Okay. Would that explain part of the reason? Because
That-
that's a
that-
significant
that
jump
could-
between the two.
Could certainly, that's just a pricing code. The ones that end in .0 are an older code, where the ones that has the .5 would be an updated code. So there may not be as much difference between that as you think. It wouldn't be $8 and $3. And so that would be a place I would look first. That's a very good catch. I appreciate you noticing that.
With that said, I'd make a motion to table this to the next meeting, those two properties anyway.
Okay, we have a motion to table the Abode and Temele
I'll second.
with a second. Any further discussions or questions for Mr. Hirschfeld or Mr. Clement? We'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mr. Trustum?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. Mr. Hirschfeld will look into those two properties and see if there's any discrepancies that were missed. The next item up is Jewel Blue. That is a 12 unit. Mr. Clement?
Yes,
Is that the green building on First?
yes. Yeah, 20 on First Street?
Yeah.
Yes.
So we're like 29,000 apart? Is that what,
Well, yeah, we're not a big deal apart. It's just that, what's the reason why you didn't want to stick with the state? I just don't understand that. They were at 95,000, 415,000 units, which I believe is still too high for those units on a 12-plex, for what they're renting for. That's high. And then, the city came up with,
97.9.
right, 97,933. Yeah, it's not a big deal, I guess, but why change it? Why don't you just go with what the state had? The state can't be that incompetent.
Okay. Any other questions on Jewel Blue? Not, I'd look for a motion on Jewel Blue.
Mr. President, I would move to deny 1670-2900-1500.
We have a motion to deny the adjustment on property named Jewel Blue.
second?
We have a second. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Next property is TMJ Properties, 8-plex. The difference between the state and our valuation is about $30,000 on this 8-plex. I think if you figure it out, it's about the same.
Same units,
Yep.
same exact units, same size, except one building's an 8-plex, one's a 12.
And these are by each other too?
What's that?
Are these near each other too? Same area?
Yeah, block away.
These on 23rd or?
It's on 23rd, but First Street runs into 23rd.
Right on the corner there, kind of?
The Bureau of Land Management there? Yeah. right
We have them
across
about
the street.
$725 difference in value.
Yeah.
What they're assessed at. And I think the state was at that same level at 95, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I just don't see why it shouldn't even been brought up, but
94.9. There are no more questions or comments. I'd look for a motion on TMJ Properties.
Mr. President, I move to deny 1670-2900-1200.
A motion to deny 1670-2900-1200 TMJ Properties, an eightplex. Deny the adjustment.
Second.
Motion to deny with a second.
Again, just a quick, any idea why the unit prices are different? Is there, what the difference is?
Mr. Frederick, on this one, I know there's a small difference, but I haven't committed that to memory. I can bring that back, but we did go through that side by side. I corresponded to Mr. Clement on why the difference was, because he said they're exactly similar, and there is a small difference between them that results in that negligible difference.
The $700 per
Okay.
unit. Okay. We have a motion to deny with a second. Any further discussion or questions for Mr. Clement or Mr. Hirschfeld? Now we'll vote. Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We'll get that additional information for you on the other two properties, Mr. Clement.
Are you gonna bring back the Pheasant Run stuff next meeting?
I'll talk to
Okay.
Joe.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next item up is Sierra Ridge. No one from Sierra Ridge?
President, Sierra Ridge is being represented by Ryan Inc. Mr. Ethan Horn, he's been before us before. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here tonight. Not entirely certain that he isn't, and why not this evening. I think they've got a meeting this evening as well with their Board of Equalization. And I do have within your packet the first 3 pages of this report that he sent me. The assessed value on that's $26,498,700. Their opinion of value is $13,319,000. Just to do what I call a down and dirty check on this one here, not even delving into their numbers for accuracy, anything else, how close is it to what market is, but on the final page, the income capitalization approach for 2018, near the bottom it shows net income after reserves of $1,489,055. They used a cap rate of 11.18%. You substitute that with the 6.5% that Mr. Ayler and Vanguard appraisals found in our local market, and that 6.5% I might even argue is a little bit high because that is for older properties. This is a newer one, but be that as it may, 6.5% caps out at $23 million. If you use a 10 gross income multiplier on the net income of or the effective gross income of $2,876,000. That comes up to a value of $28,769,000. The assessed value of $26 million falls in between the 23 and the 28. If we are looking at doing a 10% reduction, that would get that property down to $24 million. Now we're, with a cap rate of 6.5, which might be just a touch high. Even if it's not, there's $1 million difference. So I think we're very close on the Sierra Ridge property, especially if we give the 10% to it.
Okay, and this would be one of those that comes back with the 10%.
Correct.
Okay. So that item will also need to be tabled until you get us those figures, correct?
Very good.
I'd look for a motion to table Sierra Ridge.
Second.
We have a motion to table Sierra Ridge with a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Next item up is West Ridge. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Jeremy Easom. I work for Roars Companies. I'm here as a representative of the company. I was asked by Jim Roars to attend on his behalf. He would have liked to have been here, but he's serving in the legislature in Bismarck right now, and I'm hoping to take about 5 minutes of your time. I know there's a lot of information here that it sounds like the folks at the office have been speaking with Mr. Hirschfield a little bit, but it's definitely taken some time to put all this together, so it maybe wasn't in the right time that could have given it to you before. So Roars is here to dispute several parcels valuations for 2019. The biggest one that we have is the Westridge Apartments, and the proposed assessment's $16,438,700. We do have a third-party appraisal that's included in your packet. That appraisal was performed by CBRE November of 2018 and was valued the apartments at $10,050,000. So we do appreciate that the assessment for the apartments decreased from the 2018, but we still think that the numbers are off. The proposed assessment shows value per unit of over $106,000 per unit, and the appraisal shows it closer to $64,000 per unit. I understand we've come before you before to challenge these assessments. I don't believe we've had a lot of luck. We are heavily invested here in Dickinson. Roars is heavily invested in Dickinson. In fact, speaking to the commercial properties Mr. Hirschfield mentioned, there's $1.2 billion worth of commercial property in Dickinson on the tax rolls, and Roars owns 77 million of this, which is basically 6% of the city's total commercial property tax. So we're heavily invested here, but the numbers have to work. I was told to apologize to you again for getting this appraisal in your hands. I know it just got into Mr. Hirschfield's hands yesterday. This is busy time for our accounting staff, being tax season, and then of course putting together all of these. We have several parcels in the city, and so it's just going through them all and getting everything put together. It took us some time. So I'll give you a quick walkthrough. I'm the B team, just so you know. I didn't put any of this together. I'm just I live here, so I drew the short straw and get to come and talk to you tonight. So, but I'll give you a quick run through of the information that I passed out. There's a list of parcels that we are disputing the valuations on, a summary page about the Westridge Apartments, the 2019 assessment, and then our appraisal, and then copies of the proposed assessments and historical values of the other disputed properties that found on the assessor's website. Of course, the appraisal performed by CBRE, and there's a lot of information here. We own 260 parcels of land in Dickinson, and we're disputing 27 tonight. Thank you. I would try to answer questions if you have them. I know, like I said, you're getting a lot of information right now, so you may not have them yet, but
Any questions for Mr. Easom? I guess just looking this over very quickly, on the unimproved land, it seems that it went with the values that you have used, were 2015 assessed values, am I correct?
I would actually defer that question. I'd ask Mr. Hirschfield if you could help, because I know he had a conversation with our team to put this together. He might be better apt to answer your question.
I mean, I'm just looking from page 1 here to page 2, unimproved land, and it looks like, and I guess my
Oh.
question would be, how is something $1.5 million that was assessed, if it's unimproved, right? I mean, I'm taking your word for it, there's nothing
Correct.
on this land
That's correct.
unimproved at $9,000, and then now it's 1.5 million assessed value.
And Mr. President, not quite sure which page is that on?
This folder here with the charts. And it's got, I guess it would be, let's just say Exhibit A. It's got an A tab on it.
Okay.
I may be able to help a little bit.
Okay.
I think that this property is, if you think of the land out west of Menards, it's platted land, but there are no streets. So it is still in its virgin state, but when it was assessed prior to a plat, it must have been assessed at that lower value. And then as soon as the plat was filed, even though there aren't any roads out there, it must have jumped up.
Okay.
That would be
So
my guess.
it's been subdivided then, or platted?
Platted, yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, and I think there may be some confusion here, and you're looking at the 2019 assessment versus the 2019 true market value, is that correct?
Right, but they're basing their true market value off of the second page, which it was assessed at, it says assessed value. If you look at the very top, all the way
Yes,
to the
okay.
right, it says 2015 assessed values. You drop down,
That's correct.
Well,
it says 9,900.
and I would have to double check this, but I believe the statement to be accurate, that that value was carried in from the county when it was annexed, and that would be an ag land value without any other consideration being placed on it.
Okay. So I think what we need as a board is these unimproved lands, we need information on them. Because just looking at numbers here, and we can't truly make a decision without having actual details on what happens to this land. I mean, I would agree with you, in 2015, it was probably a cornfield. And then,
Now it's a hayfield.
right, but
Mr.
it,
Carson's
but it's still,
Yeah.
it's still platted, and so, any other questions for Mr. Esom, or questions for Mr. Hirschfeld on those? Let's just look at those unimproved properties first. Am I correct? It was one time it was assessed at 4.8 million in 2016?
And, Mr. President, that's quite possible. And this is all going back by memory to when these properties were before us in an abatement 2 or 3 years ago. And the information that the assessing department had was that water lines and sewer lines had been installed in that area. And when it was found out that it hadn't, then that value that was added because that infrastructure was removed from these parcels.
Yeah, it wasn't, in 15 it wasn't on our books. So that was just, that, because, yeah, it wasn't on our books in 15. So, Commissioners, is this something you want Mr. Hirschfeld to delve into, or are we fine with the assessed value? Because if you do look back, it went, at one point it was all the way up to 4.8 million, and now we're sitting at 1.5. And if you look at all the properties, they have a wide swing in what they were valued at. And I do remember an abatement at one time before, when they came to ask for this on the lots. Is this something we want to table, or are we fine with our valuations?
Mr. President, this is a lot of information that Mr. Hirschfeld just received yesterday and we just got today. Therefore, I would motion that we table this and allow for them to sit down and look at these properties.
Are you talking all the properties or just the unimproved?
We can start with the unimproved.
Okay. So we have a motion to table the unimproved and to provide more information to the Board of Equalization on these properties.
Second.
Second.
Oh,
We have a second. Is there any more questions or comments for Mr. Easom or Mr. Hirschfeld? If not, we'll vote on tabling all the unimproved land adjustments until we are provided with more information. Go ahead and vote. Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. Okay, we have the vacant land up above on Exhibit A. I would take it that these are lots within or around Cornerstone, Family Fair.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Any questions for Mr. Hirschfeld on the assessed value or Mr. Easom on what they feel is true market value? Looking at about $500,000 difference on the first property.
Can you, again, which parcel is this? Is it out there?
I would say that I would just off the top of my head, probably the top one is the property just west or east of Menards. The next one down would be the one just to the west of the homestay, or
Buffalo Wild Wings? Or
just to the north or south of Buffalo Wild Wings.
And it looks like those came down around $2 million, a little over that, both properties from last year. Assessed value, 2018.
Mr. President, I'm sorry, Mr.
Go ahead.
I was noticing here that we're looking at about a 50% reduction between 18 and 19. That would be part of the land residual study that I know Vanguard Appraisals did.
Right.
I didn't know if we didn't maybe want to have Mr. Ayler come up and comment on to what went into this valuation, how he arrived at those values.
Sure.
Mr. Ayler, if you would.
Good evening. My name is Bob Ayler. I am the president of Vanguard Appraisals, and I worked with Joe to help him analyze the commercial properties this year. The first thing we did is we ran reports out of the CAMA system, the computer system that he uses to arrive at his values, and we sent operating statements to all the hotels, apartments, mini storage, basically the income producing properties. We received operating statements back. I believe on the apartments we received 12 statements or income and expense statements from the apartments. What we did with that information then is we compared that to the sales that occurred, and we arrived at market rents for the apartments. We compared that to the sales to arrive at the capitalization rate that was referred to earlier. We concluded from that information that a 6.65% loaded cap rate was what was indicated by the marketplace. We then took this information and took it to all 12 operating statements that we received. Now, I believe you've got a copy of my report. So what I am referring to, some of the information is in here, but page 5, these are the 4 sales that we analyzed. And from this information to the income data that is on the next page, That's how we concluded the 6.65. Now, the analysis is not shown in this report, nor are these properties on page 6 identified, because we do promise confidentiality to all the property owners. So we then took the market rent, applied it to these 12 properties, or took the actual income applied to these 12 properties, used that 6.65% cap rate to arrive at an indicated value. So now we've determined a value from the income approach and from a sales approach on select properties. We took that information and compared it to the depreciated cost that is currently in the CAMA system for the city. And based on that comparison, the value that the city had on the properties before any obsolescence was 20% higher than what our analysis indicated. So the idea, the model that is used in the assessment for the city is actually a cost model, not an income or a sales comparison model. It is a cost model. But we use sales and the income, compared it to that adjusted cost, and it indicated 20% economic obsolescence to all the apartments. So that is what was applied. And that was, I believe, 10% is what you used last year. So that was an increase of 10% in the obsolescence, and that's why the decrease is applied. The one thing we discussed when we did this analysis was these large complexes. We did not have any sales of large complexes. And we had very limited income data. We only had really one real large facility that supplied us with income data. So we did not have enough market data to determine if large units needed an additional adjustment, which we find in a lot of markets that they do need that. So we decided not to apply an adjustment, but just recently, reviewing some sales that occurred actually in Williston, and looking at the cap rates, we talked about it just earlier today, that it does look like based on some additional information that came in, the large units do need a reduction. And that's what we discussed earlier, and it was brought up here tonight, that the large units should see a 10% reduction. This property that was just being discussed, the Westridge, this property would fall in that category, so it would see the 10% reduction. I would like to address the appraisal that was submitted, if I may, on this property.
Please.
There are two approaches used to value the property in this appraisal. There are 6 comparable sales. Do you all have copies of the appraisal?
We do.
Okay, I am looking at page 52. The appraiser uses 5 sales from the city of Williston. And then he uses 1 sale from here in Dickinson. And that is sale number 6. So if you look at the sales from Williston, and you're going to look on the chart on page 52, about in the middle of the chart, there's an adjusted price per unit. If you look at sales 1 through 5, you're going to see that these actual sales are sold for $79,500 for a low and $100,455 for a high. Then there is the sale number 6. You can see it sold much, much lower. It sold for $55,000. That's half. That's half of what the other properties are selling for. So that is a red flag to an appraiser. So I went back and I looked at the information on this sale number 6. And now if you go to page, well, the page is not numbered, but if you go back about 3 pages, you're going to find what's called his comparable sheet. It looks like this, and it's sale number 6. And sale number 6, he has 2 pages of information. And on the second page of that information, he has some notes. And in about the middle of the notes, I start reading that Friedman Real Estate became the court-appointed receiver of this property. Details on any default on financing were unavailable to the appraiser. Then he goes on to say, this property was purchased as a portfolio sale along with Pheasant Ridge Apartments in Watford City. The buyer noted that the bulk purchase as well as the quick closing period on the sale are both reasons for a discounted sale price of both assets. This is a distressed sale. This was a property that was in financial trouble, and it was forced on the market with a limited marketing period. This sale should not be used as a comparable sale, as an arm's length transaction. It is not an arm's length transaction. It was forced on the market. So now if we remove that sale, now I'd like to direct your attention to page 53 of the appraisal. The appraiser concludes a value of $65,000 per unit. Well, if you throw out sale number 6, which should not be in this appraisal, in my opinion, you are left with 5 sales that are between basically $80,000 and $100,000. His conclusion of value is well below that. If the 10% adjustment is made to this property, as already been discussed tonight, the assessment will end up in the range of about $97,000 to $98,000, which is within that range. Then there's an income approach also concluded on this property, and I could walk you through that as I just did, but for the sake of time, I will just reference that the capitalization rate indicated by that sale number 6 is much higher than the other 7 sales or other 5 sales. The appraiser did the same thing in his income approach. He inflated the capitalization rate based on that sale number 6, which gave him a much lower value. If he had thrown out sale number 6, his cap rate conclusion would have been much lower, and therefore his value would have been much lower. So in my opinion, this appraisal is downgraded quite a bit because of that one distressed sale that the appraiser is giving considerable weight to.
Right, any questions for Mr. Ayler?
Thank you for going through that with us.
Yeah, I would agree with you, that should not have been in there. So, anybody doing formulation like that can skew the outcome with just one big outlier.
Well, the appraiser is giving a lot of weight to that outlier.
Right.
When you look at his averages and his medians of all the sales, he is obviously giving most weight to that sale, and it's not an arm's length sale.
All right, any other questions or comments? Thank you very much for that.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'd add one thing.
Yes.
Just, and again, this isn't my expertise, but just listening to that statement, the 10% reduction gets us to that. It sounded like 97,000. That is almost, it's basically higher than 4. If you throw the 1 out, which I'm not saying I would, but there's 5 there, and that puts it higher than 4 of the 5. And again, all of those are in Williston. So I'm not so sure the 10% even does the trick on this one. So just put that out there.
Okay, well, appreciate the comments. And commissioners, this, the vacant lots, basically, if you look at, and I guess I do have a question for you, Mr. Easton. Like our assessed value on one of the vacant is 692, and they're saying the true market is 827. So you want us to increase it?
Again, I didn't put this one together, but I suppose it's based on square footage.
Yeah,
And I think, and my guess is.
I'm sure that was in their formula. They just.
Yep,
they
it's formula.
Threw it together with
Mhm.
the square footage. Yeah. I'm sure it washes out if you make all the adjustments from the
Correct.
2.5 to the 2 million and the 2.1 to the 1.7, so
Yeah.
I'm sure it's, the formula is pretty close. So. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Mr. Easom on any of these properties, considering that West Ridge Apartments will be part of that 10% reduction overall to large units?
I guess I'm in the same situation on this. I'd like to see it tabled and brought back. First of all, so I can read half of this stuff.
On all of them, or?
I thought we tabled everything. We tabled
Well, we
everything.
tabled the unimproved. And we've already just, is Prairie Winds, are they more than 100 units each? Prairie Winds 1 and 2?
No, they wouldn't fall in. They're
At 100?
I think they're 36 units apiece, so.
Okay, so they wouldn't fall under
Certainly
that.
too.
Okay. I guess then I'm open to whatever motion you want to make on these properties.
If I'm doing the math right, they're about 83.5 a unit. If they're 36 units on the Prairie Winds.
At our assessed value.
At the 2019 assessment. Do you know what we had these at in 2018?
Yes, it's on here. Prairie Winds is not on here, but if you look on their last page, Exhibit A, they were at 3.2, almost.
Okay.
Yeah, one was 3.223 and one was 3.224. So. So they were reduced from last year. Again, I'd look for a motion on any or all these properties. And we can table the vacant land if you want. Individual parcels, if you like. Like I said, there are some, their true value, market value is higher than our assessed value, so I'm pretty sure they're not wanting us to adjust those.
Which one is Prairie Winds?
Prairie Winds would be just to the north of Tractor Supply, just below the hill there.
Okay.
Down by the house.
That's what I thought.
They're right beside each other.
Yep, they're right beside each
Yeah.
other. Yep.
Mr. President, it would be good to know if they went with a flat per square foot rate on that, without consideration of where it was located within the subdivision. I mean, that might account for some of the variability if we have some of the ones that have good visibility at a higher rate than some of the interior lots. I mean, almost
You're talking on the vacant land.
on the vacant lots, the improved ones. I mean, it tallies everything up there, but I'd be surprised if we were off very much, you know, between the two columns if you just summed one versus the other, because just looking at how some decrease and some increase.
Right. That's why I said it probably washes out on the,
I would say that they are different square foot price. I know you know, I don't believe they would apply the same square foot price to, say, the lot by Menard because it's so many acres. You know, it's actually a economy to scale, so I'm sure that there's a different square foot price in the, in there. And I would, you know, if you're planning to table those, I'm sure that we could sure get together with Sarah and go through all those one by one.
And do we have some recent sales there? I mean, obviously there's
I would say the credit union's probably the most recent.
The
farm credit, you know.
We had one other sale out there since the credit union, I know.
I know the sales have been very near what the full value is on those, and part of the consideration that I know Mr. Ayler took into consideration this year was doing a discount on those due to the fact that the holding period is longer now than what it used to be. So I think it was a 50% vacancy. He applied to all those vacant lots out there for an extended holding period. So that's what explained the difference between 2018 and 2019.
Yeah, because if you look at the 2018 value, that first parcel was almost $5 million, and now it's 2.5. I mean, the pretty significant reduction. And the second parcel's almost $2 million even. The other parcels, almost all of them were cut in half.
Mr. President, with the recent assessment analysis that was done by Vanguard, I would move to deny the vacant land parcels.
Mrs. Murtha, we have to do each one individually, or?
If you wanted to do a joint motion, I would just suggest being really clear in the motion which properties are being referred to.
Okay.
Thank you. So I will revise that motion. I move to deny parcel number 41-2505-05000-700, parcel 41-2500-03000-600, 41-2509-02001-700, 41-2509-02001-400, 41-2509-02001-200, 41-2509-02001-300, 41-2509-0200-800.
We have a motion to deny the vacant land owned by Roars by parcel.
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion or questions on these parcels? Now we'll vote. Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Next item up would be Perry Winds 1, Apartment 1. Present value, city assessed value is $3,007,500. The request from Roars is to lower the true market value of $1,920,000. Last year's assessed value on this property was $3,223,000 even. So the property was lowered from last year to this year, roughly $216,000.
And we're looking at that 10% only on properties that are 100 units or more?
Yes, that is correct. And just from the information that was floated here tonight, and I got this at the same time you did, the estimate for Westridge was $65,000 based off a sale that we think was below market, to a high of $95,000. You drop off that low one, we're at $85,000, based on the sales, and those were adjusted in. or the Williston market. I don't know how accurate his adjustments are, but we'll take it at face value. I mean, we fit in between those sales that occurred up there adjusted.
And just, I didn't write it down before. These are how many units in each?
36.
36 in each?
For Prairie Winds, yeah, they're 36 each.
So roughly, that's what we have these at, is 85,000 a unit.
Mr. President,
Mr. Frederick?
I'd make a motion that we deny 41-2507-01002-600 and 41-2507-01002-700.
Have a motion to deny.
Second.
With a second. Any further discussion, questions? Not, we'll vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Trustum?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. Westridge Market Center, this is a retail property. Mr. Eastham, right? This is composed of, I think in our packet we had 8, is it 8 different rental pieces? I think.
That doesn't seem like enough,
Doesn't seem enough.
Hmm.
Maybe I missed one when I was counting it, but
but it is the retail property.
it is the retail strip mall in that location.
Correct.
Okay.
Well,
And then this year, our assessed value is $5,279,700. Roars is asking us to lower it to $2,270,000. Last year, the assessed value on this property was $5,344,400. So it has come down $65,000 from last year.
Mr. Eason, did you guys provide them with any financial information regarding this property? Profit and loss statements?
You
The
know,
last 3 years? I mean,
I
it's-
truly apologize. I know Sarah and Mr. Hirschfeld have been talking. She's our accountant in our office. I don't know what was provided and when.
I mean, do you know how much of this has been vacant since you built it,
I would say
percentage-wise?
60% of it, if not more.
The two very large
The two
components.
corner lots have
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, they're 6,000 square feet each,
Yeah.
if I remember right.
It very well could be closer to 75%.
I just look at,
And there's 9 units in there, I missed
I
one.
mean, I look at the history of this thing. We went from 5.5 million from the day it was built to 5.2 million, and it's got a 60% vacancy rate. I struggle with that. Obviously, the value can't be there if it's 60% vacant. I mean, I look at the land has not changed a dollar in those 4 years, 5 years. And we've only dropped the 300,000 basically on the value of the building.
And Mr. Frederick, I would want to review the card and see how much obsolescence we have on it for vacancy. If it's not adequate, I wouldn't be against adding obsolescence to it for economic reasons.
I mean, there obviously has to be some, I mean, it can't be worth what it's worth if it's not, doesn't have any tenants or barely any income. I mean, it just, I struggle. I just don't, how come the land never changes? I mean, we all know that land in 2015 was probably worth more than land in 2018.
And I apologize, Mr. Ayler, that was the question I had asked you up for before.
I mean, I know this is improved land now, it's different.
Right, and Mr. Ayler covered the land, and that's what resulted in the decreases to the vacant land, was part of the land residual. We had adequate land sales, prior to 2015 that set those values. But, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here, he'll do a better job of explaining it. But when you look at the value of the improvements on the land and then remove that value and what's remaining is land value, that value has remained with Dickinson parcels even through this time. Even the handful of sales we have been, you know, at or near what those values have been. It's just our sales have decreased significantly. So the vacancy goes on the vacant lands for an extended holding period, but the value still remains with the land. I mean, and Mr. Ayler, if you will, I mean, with your permission, Mr. President, he'll do a much better job of explaining it.
Okay, when we did our analysis, there were a few vacant lot sales that we were able to look at. And so we applied the additional vacancy based on those sales for the vacant lots. When we looked at the improved sales throughout the city, so not just the apartments, but we looked at all commercial. We looked at retail, the industrial and warehouse buildings. So we looked at the existing land value that was on those properties. And for example, if I take you to the warehouse industrial properties, we actually had to raise the value on those. The sales were coming in higher than the current assessments. So if we had lowered the land is all valued based as an improved site. So we value land as if it has a building on it. So if we had lowered those rates, we would have been way low on the improved sales. So after discussing that with Joe, we decided to leave the land values on the improved properties where they were at, and then to use the vacant lot sales to make that vacancy adjustment. And the idea there is this land, there's an abundance of vacant land, and the holding period to sell that land has extended because people just aren't buying like they did during the boom. And so that's a holding period, absorption rates change, and that's why the vacancy was applied to reflect that. But we actually left the improved land alone, because if we did not, we would have been too low on the retail and the warehouse office type properties.
Is that a clear enough explanation?
Makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Hirschfeld or Mr. Esom on this property? You said, I think the largest units here are sitting vacant for, I know the back units sat vacant almost exclusively since it's been built.
Yeah.
Correct.
Some of those don't even have concrete in them, if I remember right.
That's correct, yeah. We typically just build the shell and wait for a tenant to do the tenant fit up so that we get the plumbing in the right place. So the majority of that building that has not had anything in it is just a dirt floor.
Do you know, have we received financial information on this property?
Mr. President, Commissioner Frederick, I do not recall getting information on this particular building.
Might be in your best interest to supply it.
Okay.
With that, I'd make a motion to table this one.
Okay, we have a motion to table West Ridge Market Center to get us the information, get us some financial information on occupancy and rental rate. So we have a motion to table.
Second.
The second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. Last is West Ridge Apartments, and this is property that would qualify for the 10% reduction to the improvements. And this, so that would be an item that would be tabled until we get that total.
We need a motion for that.
Yes.
So moved.
A motion to table West Ridge Apartments.
Second.
Any further discussion, questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. West Ridge Apartments is tabled upon receiving more information. Thank you. Anyone else?
Mr. President, the last one I have on your list is Custer Crossing. They got a hold of me here the last day or so. This is the comparable number 6 sale that was in the West Ridge appraisal. So this is the property. They're looking to have the purchase price placed on that. The purchase price of $5,940,000 as compared to the assessed value that we currently have of $12,246,100.
And that was the distress sale. That was,
This was the distress sale. It is also over 100 units.
so the 10% would apply to this one.
That is
So,
correct.
Okay.
Which unit is this, Joe? Where's this one at?
This is the,
I think this
over
is
by
up-
Lincoln Street.
Up north, over by Rough Rider,
KLJ.
isn't it?
By
Or-
Kale- by
Oh, by
KLJ.
KLJ,
Oh,
okay.
okay.
So this one would need to be tabled until you can provide us with the new value with the 10% reduction.
That is correct.
Okay. Look for a motion to table this item.
So move.
Second.
Any further discussion, questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Trustum?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Is there anyone else in the audience that has any other items that wish to be discussed? Mr. Hirschfeld, are there any items that we left unattended?
Mr. President, that is all the properties that I have before you. I'm looking for my agenda. And here we go.
The next item would be adding property to the assessment list. Or is there any property that needs to be added, which was omitted by the owner or the assessor?
I do not have any missed property to add at this time.
Okay, and then there's no one in the audience that wishes to add any property. Because we have tabled so many items here, we basically have to, we cannot end this session if I remember correctly. We cannot.
And Mr. President, we still have the real estate exemptions tacked on.
Okay, okay. So we'll need to look at the real estate exemptions.
And those have also been included in your packet.
Mr. President, I would move to approve the real estate exemptions.
We have a motion to approve the real estate exemptions.
Second.
Any questions on the real estate exemptions? I think most of these are just your standard homestead or
Churches.
churches and
Schools.
Nonprofits.
All right. Any other questions? We'll go ahead and vote. Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries on the real estate exemptions. We basically,
Now, you continued this meeting until the next meeting date. I was just discussing that with Administrator Ga about, there are some items on the meeting on the 16th. However, given the number of items that you have tabled, you may want to set another
date?
date.
Okay.
And Mr. President, if I may, in the past, we have went ahead and accepted the values of everything that has been completed tonight and closed everything except for the tabled items. That would prevent anyone else who didn't show up tonight from coming in for the first time at the follow-up meeting.
Okay. I'd look for a motion to accept the values as presented this evening, except for those that are tabled.
So move.
Motion to approve the valuations,
Second.
except for those tabled, with a second. We'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We will have to be in continuation, but we need to discuss,
Next day.
yes, because right now it's scheduled for the 16th, right?
Yes.
Mr. President, I will not be here.
On the 16th?
I have a business trip,
Okay.
but I might be able to call.
So what we're looking at is, would anybody be available on the 15th?
It's Monday.
I will be out Sunday through Tuesday.
Okay. Would you be able to be on the 15th? I know it's tax day, but hopefully yours are done.
Mr. President,
Yes.
the 10% adjustments won't be difficult, but the number of properties that haven't been before us yet, that haven't been reviewed, like Mr. Clement's Pheasant, Runner Pheasant Ridge, and those vacant lots, may take a little more time to have that prepared than for early next week.
So what are we looking at? How much time do we have? Can we go out to the 24th?
That would be the following Tuesday.
No, that would be that would be a Wednesday. Because I am out of town from the 17th to the 23rd.
The 24th would work for me.
Would it work for the rest of the commission?
Oh, I will be out of town. It's a tough one.
Well, as long as there's three of us here, myself and,
The 24th you're talking?
yeah, the 24th.
I don't have anything, so I could make it.
Ms. Walla? We can get a hold of Mr. Steiner, too.
You're gone, you said?
And what time do we don't have to meet I don't think we need to meet in the evening. We can meet during the day if that works for any of you, or even in the morning.
That's fine. with me.
24th, at what time? 9 o'clock, 09?
I could do that.
9 o'clock?
Miss Walla?
No? 8 o'clock? 9? Okay. 9 o'clock on the 24th. That'll give you enough time?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, Mrs. Murtha, I rudely cut you off. You were stating that this meeting needs to...
Oh, I don't, no, I was finished.
We don't need to adjourn, though,
No,
right?
you move to continue the
Okay.
meeting until the 24th.
Okay. Need a motion to continue the meeting until the 24th.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion to continuance to the 24th with a second. All in favor, state aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Not. We are adjourned.
We need to move. We need to